All right. Can you imagine for a second that you are a 4, 5 year veteran of the NFL? You sit down on your couch one night in April, and all of a sudden, come flashing across the screen is the person that's gonna take your job. Like, can you imagine that? Like, what other work does that happen? Like, what other job does that happen? Like, the accountant draft? I don't think they have that. Anyway, today on the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page, we're going to be talking about guys that have the most to lose and the most to gain at the NFL draft. Welcome into the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. I'm Garret Price. We're talking about the NFL draft. We are talking about guys that have a lot to gain and guys that have a lot to lose at this year's NFL draft. And we're going to focus on some guys that are fantasy relevant, but there's going to be a couple guys in here that there might be a little lower, but we're talking dynasty. Dynasties, everyone's relevant. Everyone could end up being something. So we're going to dig a little deep on a few, but a lot of them are going to be some bigger names that I want to discuss and I want to cover here. And one of the guys that seemingly would have something to lose because there's going to be some targets taken away, but I think is actually a good thing. It's Kyle Pitts. Uh, Kyle Pitts is the only show in town in Atlanta. And it highly looks like they're going to be bringing somebody in at the wide receiver position. In fact, they've interviewed Treylon Burks, Drake London, Chris Olave, and Jameson Williams that we know of at the position. So it would be very surprising if they don't leave round 1 or round 2 with a new wide receiver. And yes, for most teams, you're like, oh, a new wide receiver is coming in. That means less targets for me. Well, there were plenty of targets to be had. I think another player and someone else in town other than just Kyle Pitts, this is actually good news for him. So this is one of the few players that we're going to be talking about that actually has a lot to gain by a person being added at his position. Well, he's not a wide receiver. He's a tight end, but we know he's a receiver. Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills, the tight end position there. We're going back to the tight end position. Dawson Knox was a breakout player last year, but I would be very concerned if Dawson Knox was my tight end 1 going into this season. Reason being, the Buffalo Bills have matched or exceeded every other NFL team with their visits so far. 7 tight end visits, and a lot of those guys are the big names, including Trey McBride. So Dawson Knox maybe hasn't quite done enough to be the guy there in Buffalo. So if he's your tight end 1 or you're lacking some depth there, I would hurry up and make sure that I did something about that. Houston, there's not really something to lose there because I don't know who the guy is. They just brought in Marlon Mack, so you can make that argument, but I don't know. Is David Johnson still kicking around? I should call him, ask. I don't have his number, but I should find out. And either way, they've brought in a lot of running backs, but it's not just that they've brought in some running backs. They've brought in a lot of the big boys. Isaiah Spiller, Breece Hall, both been brought in for visits. I don't think this team is at the position that they should be using higher end draft capital, day 1, day 2 draft capital on running backs, but this is how bad franchises stay bad. So it would not shock me if there's a day 2 pick for the Houston Texans that ends up being a running back. Mecole Hardman. Yes, the truthers are still out there. And yes, they still think that this is now his time to shine. But whether it's Mecole, whether it's Juju, I'm not sure either one of these guys are the future wide receiver 1 of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't think the Chiefs believe that either. They have brought in a slew of receivers, but the big names, Christian Watson, Jameson Williams, Treylon Burks, George Pickens, 4 guys that could all be available for them in the second round there, or sorry, in the first round. They have the 2 picks in the first round. They could easily be making a big time deal to go ahead and grab a wide receiver. So, yeah, I'd be a little nervous if I were those guys. And if I'm you, I wouldn't count on those guys being the wide receiver 1s very long on this team. Minnesota. Yeah, Adam Thielen, he's getting kind of old. And I know KJ Osborne, he looked pretty good last year, but I think Minnesota's looking to upgrade their wide receiver core a little bit. And all of these have so far been according to walterfootball.com. So if you want to go ahead on there, look at their free agent or their rookie visits tracker, you can go on there, check it out, see who's been visiting who's been visiting where, but go look at it. But 6 wide receivers have been on visits there. Not all big names necessarily, but they're definitely looking at the wide receiver position. And the most well-traveled man, Treylon Burks, has been to like legitimately, I'm not even being sarcastic, like half of these teams. Treylon Burks has visited, and Minnesota's one of these teams as well. So I don't know if it's people don't know where he's going to go, so everybody wants to make sure that they visit him or what, but everyone has talked to Treylon Burks seemingly. All right, last but not least, the Washington football team, aka the Washington Commanders. This is the one that you might have, if you're on Twitter, you might have heard about this one. But Antonio Gibson has had quite the offseason. He went from it looking like it was just his backfield. JD McKissick went elsewhere and he was all alone. He was finally going to be a 3-down back. Well, JD said, just kidding, I'm back. So he came back. On top of that, Tin has looked at 5 running backs. Yes, talked to 5 running backs so far, including what most would consider the big 3 in the class: Kenneth Walker, Brees Hall, and Isaiah Spiller. On top of that, the 2 other backs that they've talked to, Brian Robinson and Letty Brown. Now, I don't think either one of those are as scary names as the first 3, but what do all of these players have in common? These are all big physical backs. What this is telling me, maybe Washington's not super satisfied with their short, 3rd and short, 4th and short, goal line situations. They want some bigger back to tote the rock. This spells bad news when you add in the wide receiving work being taken away and then maybe some short down stuff being taken away. If you take away receptions and touchdowns away from a running back, good luck finding a running back that's going to average 130 yards a game and still be relevant. All right, that's all I have for today. But before we get out of here, let's talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks promo code NERDS. Guys, you got to get this app. You got to go to prizepicks.com. You got to get the app. You got to figure out somewhere to get this because you have incredible opportunities to be able to place some wagers, some parlays, some different things like that in order to make some cash. How you do it? Well, let's maybe look at the futures. All right. We talked about Joe Mixon the other day. Right now, looking at 1,200 yards, over under 1,200 yards for Joe Mixon. I'd probably take the over. I like Joe Mixon in this offense this year. That's what you get to do. And you can pair up different sports. We're in NBA playoffs time where we've got the MLB stuff going on. I'm sure they've got tons of other sports that you could look into as well. Those are the only 3 that I would really know enough about to do. But you might like hockey. You might like cricket. You might like badminton. I don't know what they have. They have all kinds of good stuff, though. Go on there, prizepicks.com, promo code NERDS. And what they're going to do is they're going to match your deposit up to $100. That means you put in 10, they put in 10. You put in 50, they put in 50, up to $100.